Hi, I'm Brett McGinnis. I am the engagement editor here with the Reno Gazette Journal, and I'm here today with marriage and family therapist and RGJ columnist Stephen Ng, and we are talking today about affairs. A couple of things. Stephen has written recent columns. One of them is how to affair-proof your marriage, and the second one is how marriages can survive and even thrive after an affair. We are taking your questions here. I have my laptop up. If you've got questions, you can post them directly to Facebook in the comments section. You can also email them to columns@rgj.com if you prefer. But let's get started. Stephen, tell us about affairs from the very beginning. What causes people to engage in affairs? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, that's really kind of the point of the whole discussion, isn't it? Because it is complicated. It's not just that, certain women are lying scamps, or that certain kinds of men are just, or all men are untrustworthy. It's that life is complicated, people are complicated, and although all of us get married with the idea that certainly we're going to live happily ever after, something seems to happen over the course of years together that diminishes our capacity for making good judgments. So instead of making relationship choices that work and that enhance our intimacy, we sometimes find ourselves making worse and worse decisions. But the reasons for that are complicated, far more complicated than we could boil down to just,
This is the single reason why affairs happen. A lot of our comments so far have come through say something along the lines of, this is something I can't get over. This is where when an affair happens, trust is gone. What do you say to that? Is that
Well, I'm glad you asked, because honestly, I think for those who are listening right now to this, clearly this is a subject matter that is a source of great pain. So for a lot of people, it's just so excruciatingly painful, so hurtful, that they really can't find it in themselves to think of anything other than what they themselves are going through. And so I respect that. But on the other hand, that attitude is also something of a self-fulfilling prophecy that a lot of us have been taught that, well, if your mate cheats on you, you got to get out of it.
Sure, right.
So if I really truly believe I can't do something, like get past something, or I can't possibly learn how to swim, I can't possibly save money, I don't know how to do that, it just isn't going to happen, or lose weight, or whatever our goal might be, those words become self-fulfilling prophecies that eventually end up taking on a life of their own that really I don't think is necessarily true, and I'll tell you why. Because I've met far too many people who have worked through these kinds of situations, and they all have a lot in common. They seem to be working through it, and I know they get onto the other side of it, and they do have better relationships. The alternative, of course, is that I hand grenade my relationship, the two of us separate, and we remain celibate the rest of our lives? No, of course not. People go on to have other relationships, and the next man forgives her, or the next woman forgives him for his past. And quite often people do, I know leopards don't change their spots, but people actually do change and mature and develop. And some of the mistakes we make in the past, we actually learn from. And so the chance is that if I give up my mate because they made some really awful decisions sexually, somebody else is going to get the benefit of all that wisdom they're accumulating.
Okay, all right, fair enough. The first question we have in, and again, you can submit your questions to columns@rgj.com or post them in the comments field here on Facebook. First one, say something about the European model. Everyone has a lover and stays happily married. How does that work? If you're pretending to be a French president, what does that look like, and can that translate to the United States?
It's a funny question, and I'm glad somebody finds some humor in this, because, well, for me, it wouldn't work. And I think I speak for a lot of men and women out there when I say I didn't get married so that I could have a two-track lifestyle where I have my public marriage and my secret life on the side with maybe a woman in another city, including children, a whole family, and all the rest, which is sort of that European stereotype that we all think of. I don't know actually how many Europeans actually do that. I think for some people, though, and I do know people who've done that, and I've had clients who've come into my office who said they just found out their dad had another family in another city, and they have siblings who are full-grown adults, and they never heard of them before, and they're just
Sure.
now finding out. But I think those are outliers, pretty rare.
Fair.
And I think for most of us, we get married with the idea that we're going to live happily ever after together.
Right.
So I think structuring it so that, well, you get a hall pass, sexually speaking, for every time you feel like having a dalliance. There's a downside to that, and for me, it's not a moral downside so much. I mean, there is a moral issue there that has to do with being untrue to my word and being duplicitous and sneaky and that sort of thing. But the benefits of monogamy, we don't often discuss, and I think we really should discuss them more, because it's like working on a Sudoku to maintain your mental health or any other kind of puzzle. It's more challenging to get all of my emotional and sexual needs met with one single life partner.
Sure. Okay.
I have to be more thoughtful, more intentional, more deliberate. I also have to face my fears, because the alternative for a lot of people, instead of facing their fears, is they start Frankensteining their relationship, and they get this other person for their intellectual conversation, and a third person because they're just so fun.
Right.
And somebody else because, well, they're just really hot in the sack.
Sure.
But I've got my public relationship for my public consumption, and that's something that people do, but I would argue that it's so facile that it's not mentally challenging. And I think being able to truly contemplate the complexity of making holy matrimony work, I think it's in our best interest, regardless of our religion or whether we have a religion or not.
Something you touched on earlier, something actually a question that came up in the newsroom earlier. You talk about getting a hall pass every time you want to have a dalliance. When you learn about your partner having an affair, there's got to be a strong desire to say, I want reciprocity. I want to go have my own affair or one night stand, whatever it is. What do you do with that feeling? Is that kind of the visceral, first 48 hours sort of thing? Is that an initial thing, or do you act on that? Do you move past it? What do you do?
Well, I'm laughing because not because it's not a serious matter. It
Sure.
is a serious matter, but it does breathe life into the lie that my partner's having an affair was a very bad thing. If I want exactly the same option, how bad is it really in my own moral scheme of the universe?
Okay.
So for me, the question is, when we're talking about affairs, whether it's theoretically before the affair when I'm trying to affair-proof my relationship, or after the affair when I'm trying to see, is there anything worth salvaging about this relationship? It's an existential question of who am I and what am I all about? Because if I'm the sort of person who really has a very clear mind about what I'm looking for in life in terms of monogamy and in terms of integrity and in terms of living a transparent lifestyle, then no, I really don't want to sneak around and
Sure.
have that. Nor do I want to have that tawdry, superficial one-night stand with somebody I barely know in a hotel room. Why would you want that? When what we really crave, I think, and what's critical to great sex, as well as to a great relationship, is the intimacy that we define as the ability to safely share our lives with each other.
Sure.
So if we're going to play tit for tat, it would be like my mate calling me a name, and that's abusive. And now, just to get some reciprocity, I'm going to call her a name. And then every time she throws an ashtray at my head, I'm going to throw a teacup at her head.
Right.
Where does that take us? and instead, I think going back to that existential issue of this is who I am, I'm not about that. Your decision to do that is about you.
It has nothing to do
with me and my choices.
Right.
So I'm not going to do that. And that's kind of what happens in a bad marriage, isn't it? We eventually start, well, we all face the risk at least of losing ourselves. It's one thing to lose a marriage, it's one thing to lose custody of one's children or the house or even the friends in the property settlement. But most of my clients who've gone through a divorce report that the most bitter loss of all was the loss of self, the loss of their own identity, as they continued to make compromise after compromise with their mate, trying to make it work somehow when it really wasn't working.
Right.
And so instead of really stepping back and taking a look at that, they compromised themselves. And like I said, most of us really don't want to have affairs. If we wanted to have a series of recreational sexual relationships, we wouldn't have gotten married in the first place.
One commenter just said, if you want multiple partners, don't make the choice to marry. So,
absolutely.
So what are the prerequisites for moving forward? Presumably, after the affair is found out, whether it's confessed or somebody's caught or whatever, presumably the very ground floor of moving on is that the affair has to end.
Well,
is it?
For me, it would be. I mean, that's most affairs. In fact, most sexual acting out of all types, including sex crimes, are matters of secrecy. Once the secrecy ends, usually the behavior ends with it.
Interesting. Okay.
Not always, of course,
right.
but generally. So what we're looking for, at least what I would be looking for, are reasons to hope. Now, that's hard because sometimes the little tiny bit of love that I'm getting is so much better than the zero love I think I'm going to be getting after a divorce. So why would I stay, and what would keep me from making a move to stay? I didn't get much time to talk about this in the paper, so this is kind of new
go right ahead.
information. But there's about 25% of the American general population that at any one time is absolutely incapable of intimacy. And that's a startling statistic, but for a lot of us who've gone through really horrendous relationships that have blown up in our face, and we're left scratching our heads wondering, what happened? I didn't really do anything. Why did that end the way that it did? To know that there's 25%, 1 out of every 4 people, who simply can't engage in intimacy over a sustained period of time. They can fake it,
sure,
like a psychopath faking being normal. They can fake it for months even, but generally not years. And sometimes, I think the first step is, am I married to somebody like that who's got a mental health problem and is simply incapable of doing that? And that is going to require me to come out of my denial, because if I was crazy enough to marry them in the first place, I must be believing that they were okay. Now, that's tough, but it is true. And a very obvious example would be, I think, somebody who's abusing substances, who is not interested in getting clean and sober for any reason.
Okay.
And really, what kind of a successful, intimate relationship can we have over time? Or the compulsive gambler who continues to create drama after drama by sabotaging the family finances, creating a crisis financially every time we need to pay the rent or just pay a simple bill. Checks are bouncing and we don't know what to do about it. That person needs mental health care.
Sure, okay.
Right? And I need mental health care because I picked them out. And I've chosen to stay with them for so long, sometimes years, knowing better. But I just couldn't bring myself to come out of my denial and make the leap. So there are those examples of times where you simply can't trust the other person. They are. It's not that I can't trust, because I can trust other people, but that they themselves are not competent to be considered trustworthy.
Right. Okay.
And there are those kinds of people.
So when you move on, talking about trust.
Move on with
to paraphrase. Yeah, exactly. Move on with the marriage. If you say, hey, this is something I want to salvage, I want to move forward with. To paraphrase Ronald Reagan, it's the trust but verify. Obviously, you need to trust. what does the partner who engaged in the affair, what do they owe their partner? Do they owe them all their cell phone and email passwords? Do you share your location on Find a Friend? How far do you go to prove that hey, I'm on the up and up now, and is that healthy to do? Is that or does that forever create an imbalance in the partnership?
So I've decided that my mate is not a nutter.
Sure.
The whole
this
thing
is
is
something
salvageable.
is there. Yes.
And the choice, let's say my marriage and family therapist has said, well, and you need to be given all access to all email accounts and to every form of communication, and your mate must report in when leaving work and when arriving, and
Right.
you get to have access to every sort of possible.
Yeah, you're a prison guard.
So I've yes. Well, you took the words right out of my mouth.
Yeah.
Stop that.
Oh, sorry.
Because none of us get married to become that kind of a person. If I have to have that level of verification, if I have to become a prison guard in order to be sure that my mate isn't cheating on me, then I'm turning myself into someone I don't even want to be married to.
Right.
I'm a stalker. I'm at very least a cyber stalker. I'm probably having my friends check on my mate.
Right.
And watch them.
Have you heard anything? Have you seen anything?
Yeah, let me know. And now I'm living with chronic paranoia. That's not a marriage.
Right.
And that's not something that goes away, because now I've created this environment where, how do I know that they really want to be in the marriage with me? In fact, I've made myself less attractive by engaging in all this behavior. Why would anybody want to be married to me if I'm going to be behaving that way?
Sure.
And I've known people who had voice-activated tape recorders set up in their own bedroom, so that while they were gone, if any hanky-panky occurred there,
Right.
they would know about it, who put in surreptitious cameras at different places so that they could monitor. And that's me. If I wasn't crazy before the marriage, I'm becoming crazy.
Sure.
Kind of like the wife who marries a problem drinker, and you put her together. She was fine before they married, but you put her together with a guy who's a chronic drunk for 10 years.
Right.
She's going to be kind of squirrely.
Yeah.
So it's the same way if I allow myself to become this sex police who's going to monitor my mate's behavior.
Right.
I don't recommend that at all.
Okay.
So the alternative would be actually rather abrupt. The alternative would be, if I can't trust my mate enough to let go, if I'm living with chronic anxiety, if I don't feel safe, I probably need to get out of that relationship, because that's not really what any of us wanted.
Fair enough. Again, my name is Brett McGinnis. I'm with the RGJ. We're here today with Stephen Ng, RGJ columnist and marriage and family therapist, and we're talking about surviving affairs. If you have questions, you can submit them in our comment section. You can also email them to columns@rgj.com. Tell us now about what's on the other side. Presumably you're working through this, the process is working. Marriage 2.0 is on the other side, and you say in some ways it might even be better than what it was before. What is the promised land? What can you expect? What is all the hard work for? What do you get?
Well, I think what you get is to escape the pathological level of naivete that set you up for this situation in the first place.
All right.
So if I was raised on a diet of Disney movies, and every potential marriage includes a Cinderella and a Prince Charming, in all of those sorts of two-dimensional relationships, Prince Charming is never checking out the new Skull remade, and Cinderella is never checking out the new Filipino pool boy who's taking care of the palace, gardens.
Okay.
So the reality is, if we're sexual beings, we need to make peace with the idea that we're going to be attracted to other sexual beings over the course of our lifetime, and there's no legal binding agreement like a marriage that's going to stop that, because that's part of our DNA. So if I can get past the irrational belief that, well, because we're in love, we'll never be attracted to others, or if my mate is attracted to anybody else ever, that must mean they don't love me.
Right, right.
Or if they ever are attracted to somebody else, then it's over. All of those are irrational beliefs that I think going through an affair offers at least the opportunity to examine those beliefs and to see if, is this really working for me? And is this working for us? Because to get to a point where I really have the opportunity to know my mate even more realistically, in a more grounded way, that they're actually a human being, not just a two-dimensional cartoon character out of a Disney film. They're a person who is tempted. They're a person who struggles. They struggle with me and with some of my behaviors, as glorious and wonderful as I might be.
You're right.
Right? So for any two people to work out a long-term, day in, day out commitment, that's challenging. It's easy to fall in love. Everybody watching us right now has proven that they can easily fall in love. But to make it work in a way that makes sense, it's so much more than about love. It's so much more than about attraction. There are issues like respect, compatibility, sobriety, mental health. There's a lot going on that really we need to be looking at and seeing if this is really working for us, not just, but I love her. Can't we just stay together?
Right.
That's just not enough. That's, like I would say, pathological naivete.
Okay. I know we only have a little bit more time. I want to get into a previous column you wrote about how to affair-proof your marriage. And of course, you know that nothing is 100%, as you said in your column, but talk about the steps that you might take to make sure that the affair never happens in the first place.
Well, I think there are steps we can take, and I think the first step is, all three of these steps have to do with working together as a team, because I think it takes a real partnership to handle the different challenges and temptations that come our way, including dumb financial decisions, dumb decisions about all kinds of things that come up in our life, like parenting.
Sure.
But when it comes to managing my sexuality intelligently, I'm going to be benefiting from having a real open conversation with my mate. The problem is, number one, we have to start making friends with the truth. And the truth is, as I already said, that we are all sexual beings who are going to be attracted to other sexual beings, and that's not a real problem in itself.
Right.
That's a reality. So to embrace the truth and make friends with the truth, and to understand that every time your mate is having sex with you, they're not necessarily thinking about how great you are. I know, I was shocked.
Right.
But to find out that she might actually, like the old joke says, she might actually be thinking about what color she's going to paint the ceiling, or she might be thinking about that really hot guy at work that she just met last week.
Okay.
Those sometimes, if we could just be married people for a minute talking openly, isn't it true that we sometimes wonder, did I turn off the coffee pot before I came to the bedroom? Or, wait a minute, did I take the trash out? I need to take the trash out.
Sure.
And that can be, in the middle of sex, we're thinking these thoughts, they come whizzing through our brain at about 160 miles an hour. And we kind of tend to discard them, most of us, if we're lucky.
Right.
If we're fortunate, we discard those.
Yeah, you can move on. Yes, exactly.
And we, note to self, get up and check that after, before going to sleep. But and every once in a while, what a surprise! People think about other sexual thoughts. Sometimes they reminisce about a golden oldie, some memory from the past. Sometimes they're thinking about someone they've never been with. Sometimes they're wishing that things were with me, but different from what they are.
Sure.
So friends with the truth, making friends with the truth is so important. That's the very first thing. And then the second thing is coming to face my fears, because my fears, what's going to happen to me if there is an affair? I mean, to consider the unthinkable. The unthinkable is my mate might be thinking about other people. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean I'm not man enough? Does that mean for her she's not pretty enough? Does that mean he's not whatever enough? And I think being able to face those fears is the first step toward discarding them, because if my mate chooses to have an affair, that's really on my mate. That's not about me.
Right, exactly.
That was their decision. So the last thing, and this is really where it ties up in a nice bow, I think, is to have the talk. And I think the talk isn't just one talk, but I mean establishing the okayness of giving each other the liberty to discuss our sexuality in an adult manner, in an open manner with each other, for him to come home and say, well, honey, I just saw what is probably one of the most beautiful women on the planet. And for my wife, when she hears me say stuff like that, she laughs and she folds her hands and says, okay, tell me all about it.
Right.
And now we're sharing the intel about what's going on in my poor little brain. And in the same way, when she sees somebody like George Clooney and has a thought and gets a bit of a flutter, I enjoy the fact that she's comfortable to share that with me. So it's about establishing either a positive or a negative feedback loop. A negative feedback loop is any behavior I engage in that would discourage you from ever opening up.
Right.
So I shoot you dirty looks, or I threaten you, or verbally or non-verbally. But an open feedback loop encourages the conversation and the full disclosure. Challenging question to those watching this: do you really want to know who your partner is sexually? Do you want to know their sexual thoughts? Do you want to know their fantasies? If you do, you have to learn to relax and let yourself listen. The only other alternative is not that they're going to stop having sexual thoughts and sexual fantasies. The alternative is they're going to stop talking about it.
Right.
So do I want to know? Well, sure. And that isn't a one-time conversation. That is like all the other forms of intimacy. That is a process. It takes years and years to get to ever deeper levels of intimacy and disclosure. But we're building, when I say intimacy, I mean the ability to share our lives safely with one another, where we're so safe that we can be fully open and transparent with each other. We're really kind of ruining ourselves for the one-night stand with the stranger while we're at our moose convention out of town. Because that relationship with whoever she might be is really going to be of necessity very two-dimensional, very much lacking in intimacy, and really good sex isn't just about titillation, the arousal to physical stimuli. Really great sex is about titillation plus a real emotional connection, which is part of intimacy. So if I don't have both, if I only have titillation, I'm going to get to that same old thing pretty quick, and it's going to become boring, because it's like even a 12-year-old doesn't look at his dad's January Playboy issue for the rest of his life. He gets bored, and it becomes like wallpaper after a while.
Sure, right.
And sadly, people are in marriages where their spouse becomes like wallpaper. And they can't wait to get away from them because it's just so boring. Or they just keep watching the game or her soap opera. Yes, honey, right. Get right on that. Okay. And they're not really connecting.
Right. Makes sense. All right. Well, I think we're about out of time. I want to thank our guest, marriage and family therapist and RGJ columnist, Stephen Ng.
You're welcome.
You can read Stephen online at rgj.com and also every Sunday in the Reno Gazette Journal. All right. Thanks a lot, Stephen.
Pleasure. Good talking to you, Brad. I thought you were going to go to the guy with the terrible